Hello friends and welcome to VFX Particles for Games 101. I'm doing this video because I have the feeling that there's like tons of people out there that are actually showing lots of interest in this profession, but they seem to be like very overwhelmed or intimidated by the sheer amount of stuff they have to learn. So like even 3D artists that are actually in a very technical environment overall, they look at this stuff and be like, dude, I could never do this kind of stuff. But actually, it's not so complicated at all. And with this video, I just want to take away some of that fear. So I want this to be like a very basic tutorial. I wouldn't even call it like a real tutorial. It's actually meant to be like some sort of a, like a crash course. And yeah, you could say this video is pretty much directed to absolute beginners out there. Just so you know. I would say we can start now. So what is a visual effect overall? Like, visual effect can be multiple things, like for example, like fluid simulations or smoke simulations, destructions and fracturing, like also renders that you could use in post-production in movies, or like you name it. But I guess what most people would think of when they're hearing about visual effects in games is particle systems. So what does a particle system actually look like? Before we switch into Unity, I would just say we have a quick look of particle systems on Google. Like, how do they look? So, what do we have here? Like, we have some kind of cool, I don't know, visual effects graph demo in here. It's like some holographic stuff, and then we have some nice low poly looking fire, whatever that is, looks amazing. But what is that? It's just some kind of modifier in Blender. Okay, cool. But yeah, in general, what is it? Like, what is that? Some magic stuff. There's some fire here, but what in there is actually a particle? Well, let me show you quickly. So, these things are particles, and I'm not talking about the crosses here, you know, it's not the crosses, it's just the pivot points of the particle. A particle itself looks basically like it's not even there, you know, it's like just coordinates in this, like in a coordinate system. All particles do actually is like setting up the locations of something you put in there, like if that makes sense. And what can you put on top of this stuff? Well, you saw it before. You can put on some planes. Like, these are considered to be billboards, but actually they are nothing more than 3D planes, like you would put like in Blender or in Maya or whatever software you prefer. And yeah, you can just put it in there. And the good thing about this is this has a render alignment option. By default it's on view, and this is very helpful. Like, it's very crucial for most stuff we are going to do. For like 90% of the stuff we're going to do, it's always facing the camera. Like, wherever you go, from what perspective you're viewing this stuff, it will always face it, and this gives like the impression of three-dimensionality if you do it right. So, but is that all? You're probably asking yourself, like, is that all I can do with particles, just like planes? No, not at all. You can put in custom meshes actually. And what do we have here? We can, for example, put some whatever that is. You can put in trees, you can put in like some rocks. Yeah, basically you could also put in some, you know, like fully fleshed out game characters in there, but I don't recommend it because they're like at, I would say, minimum of 60k, and this could impact the performance by quite a lot. So For now, we're gonna stick to the billboard option. So, what else can we do with a particle? Well, we can put in some trails, and these trails, let's make this a little bit smaller here. These trails are just following the trail of the particle. So we basically don't need this right here. We can just visualize it with trails, as you can see. And yeah, this is one way to visualize it. But for now, let's just stick to the normal billboard and switch trails off. So now we have this, and you're probably asking yourself now, okay, how do I achieve anything with this? This is cool. They are moving quite a lot. They are moving quite fast. But they are not looking pretty cool. What do I do with this? Well, the thing you're asking for is basically shaders and materials, and this is what we're gonna do next. So what is a material? What is a shader? Let me give you some examples here. A material itself you create with create material. There you have it. Let's call it tutorial because yeah, for the lack of a better name. And let's create a shader in here. Okay. What kind of shader are we using? I'm using the high definition render pipeline, so I go with this. Whatever you go for depends on your render pipeline, I would say. We go for unlit shader because that's like the most common thing for particles. Like, let's call it like shader basic particle. All right. So all we got to do now is just apply this shader to this material. So what does it tell you if we apply a shader to a material? Well, this means material is basically taking the shader and is like making this shader customizable and usable for the particle or whatever surface you want to put it into. So we're gonna apply this tutorial thing material to the particle system we created, and now you can see nothing really changed except that this is like not so bright anymore. But how are we going to change that? You know, as we can see, there's not much options we have here. There's no exposed properties. The reason why this is because let's close this for a minute. The shader has nothing, okay? The shader is empty. There's nothing more than just the base color and like alpha that is at 1. So let me explain you now what a actual shader is about, or what these outputs, we call it outputs, what they actually are and what they do with the material. So overall, these editors in here are based on nodes. Nodes are basically, how would I say that? It's basically operations or math operations. Like, you can do various stuff in there, and every single node you can see in here, basically it has all these functions, and it really takes some time to get behind like half of them, you know. Like, math is probably one of the most important ones, but then there's also stuff like sample texture 2D. So what does that thing do? It's one of the most important things, actually. First of all, we're gonna create a property here. So what is a property? First of all, we're gonna name this thing sprite, or no, let's say base color. We have a property in here. So what does it do? Properties are basically the direct connection, or like the level of influence you have in a material afterwards. You will see that in just a minute. So you put in the base color property in here and put in into the sample texture 2D. So for now you cannot see nothing, and the way that works is basically, so this by itself is not doing anything. It is just reading and visualizing the texture for you and also for the shader, basically. This is the link to the texture you will put in. So you put this into the texture. So far so good. But what can we put in here? Well, we have like a slot in here for textures, and we can actually put in whatever we like. Let's go for this for now. And let's put this value, the RGBA. So for starters, RGB are just the channels. Let me explain it to you with something that makes sense in this context. This beautiful dog, for example. So to visualize it, I'm gonna just put this thing into Photoshop. So where is my little doggy? It's over here. Every single picture you will encounter will have different values and different channels attached to it. And you can just see that they look slightly different for this one, but if we just go for something else, like a very basic texture, see what I did there? You will see that the red channel is pretty blown up, like it's very, very bright. The other ones are not so prominent. So this is basically how channels work, just scratching the surface, of course. But for now, we just go for the RGBA combined thing, which is basically what you see here. So you put this in the base color and save this. And now we're gonna have a quick look at how to apply materials to particle systems. Easy peasy. Just put this on top of the particle system. And as you can see now, we have like a very good case of what a property is. You know, like we set up a property here, it's a base color. You can see the same here, base color, but this is not applied. Anyway, we can just apply it to here with select, and we can go for another cute little dog. Basically, we can put in anything we want. I mean, we can go for this, we can go for the other one we pretty much liked, that I pretty much liked. Or we can go for this very smiley dog. Oh my god, I love this guy so much. Or we can do something useful actually, and maybe go for some texture that will do something for us. For example, this one here. So this is like a radial gradient, this texture. So what it basically is, you can see it with your own eyes. It's just like a glowing circle, and the glow is having a fall off that reaches to the edges, like very slightly, you know. So let's say you don't have like a whole texture library like me with like different noises and this stuff already made. You want to do it yourself. Well, let's switch a little bit to Photoshop for a second. And let's say we want to have it like 512 times 512, because that should be more than enough. First of all, we're gonna switch the background to black, because you know, that's everything we need. Then we are gonna have like a very soft brush. We're gonna put that to some size like this. Should be okay. Put it right in the middle, but we want to have like a kind of a more of a transition between the middle and the actual border of this. So what we're gonna do now is kind of getting to a Gaussian blur, putting it in there, and then we can see it's growing bigger up until the edges. Don't overdo it, because it will be visible in the actual texture, in the shader, if it's going above the borders. But this looks fine to me. Yeah, it looks pretty fine. So just keep in mind that you shouldn't overdo it with the Gaussian blur, because the range will be way too big. Let's do the same, just a bit with the duplicated one, and there we go. If we go super crazy, if we want to go super crazy, let's duplicate it again, make it a little bit smaller, just so we have a very nice transition. And there you go. There you have your very first VFX texture, simple enough. And we can use this effect to actually get rid of this shape, this rectangular shape, because I like rectangles, but for our purpose here, it would be better to have like just like an orb, right? And we're trying to achieve this here. But let's go back to the property and like exposed properties. As you were aware, like when I just did it like multiple times, I was just switching textures in here, like from here over here, and yeah, basically it makes sense. It's just like a link from the shader to the material, and you can have influence on these properties. Makes sense? Right. So, but what else can we do? Well, in general, we need a alpha texture to just make things that we don't want invisible. How can we do this? All we're going to do is just take one of these channels and put it in the alpha channel, and you will see that this is not set up to be transparent. So we put this to transparent, and there we go. And you will see the same thing happening to this if you would do the same to the material. So always be aware that you put transparent in the beginning so you're not confused. As you can see now, this whole render to the view space, like to camera, is pretty useful because you cannot see that these are planes. They're just like glowing little orbs that look the same from every direction, and this is what we're going to use for so much stuff. But anyway,